Hi, and welcome to State of Mind, the podcast about everything to do with the mind. I'm Dr. Shyam Bhat, and on this episode, I want to talk about something that I think is a really big problem, becoming an increasing problem in our country and around the world, of course. And it's a problem that is the creation of our culture, our society, and our own choices. And the problem I'm talking about is loneliness. You know that Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem, he said, "Water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink." And that is the case in our country. India, one of the most populous countries in the world, is facing an epidemic of loneliness. Now, in the US, of course, they've been talking about it for a long time. I practiced there, I saw it firsthand. But even I'm surprised by how quickly loneliness is happening in our country. Now, of course, we've always known that in societies all over the world for many decades, the elderly were very vulnerable to loneliness. The old often found themselves alone because of a circumstance, not going to, retired, living by themselves, children busy, all of those issues. But in the last decade or so, we are now seeing an epidemic of young people who are suffering loneliness. And the reasons that are creating this loneliness is only going to increase loneliness, only going to make it harder for human beings to connect. And the future, if we don't start changing, would be a world of isolated, lonely individuals who are getting their needs met through technology and not from real human contact. That is our future. It's a scary dystopian future, but one that's coming unless we change things. When I was younger, I used to love reading science fiction, and particularly Isaac Asimov, who I think was one of the best science fiction writers who really had a sense of how the future is going to unfold. And, famously, he predicted that by the year 2000, psychiatry would be the most important medical specialty. And I think, of course, he was right. In one of his books, Isaac Asimov describes a time and a planet where people live in a strange way where they really do not like interpersonal contact. They have a complete distaste for being in physical proximity with another human being, so they actually live in their own huge houses. They are completely self sufficient with the help of robots. And when they want to communicate with each other, they speak on a video screen as well as interact with each other using holograms. So, for example, if you wanted to walk with your friend in that scenario, your hologram and that person's hologram would go on a beautiful walk on the beach. Procreation did not happen through physical intimacy or sex, but was rather through artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization, and so on and so forth. Now, that strange dystopian world that Isaac Asimov described, if you extrapolate from what is happening today, will come to pass unless the human civilization does something different. Already, if you look at the way technology is moving and what big tech is talking about, they are talking about holograms, about interactions in the virtual space, in the metaverse, which is going to replicate or even be better, according to them, than interaction in the real world. Already, even without the technology of virtual reality and augmented reality, you are already spending most of your time in the virtual world, are you not? Talking to your friends virtually, having virtual friends, some of whom you may never have met. And all of these things are happening even now where virtual interactions are replacing real interpersonal interactions. So we are technologically moving towards creating platforms for loneliness as well as solutions for loneliness. So you're at home feeling lonely, and then you go onto social media to connect with somebody else on the virtual in the virtual world, end up feeling lonelier. And just like drinking salt water to quench your thirst, repeated interactions in the virtual world only make us thirsty for more, and this becomes a vicious cycle. But of course, technology is not the main cause. It is actually a symptom of the disease that afflicts our society. Because you see, the truth is that in order to connect with human beings, it does take effort, patience, time, and energy, something that psychologists call emotional labor. It was never labor when time was not a commodity. When your time did not pay your bills in one form or the other, you would have the time and energy to spend with loved ones. Or if your work entailed working with your, family, as might have happened in our agricultural past, loneliness wasn't really a thing because all endeavor was actually a team effort and a collective effort. But economies, industrialization, capitalism, and technology have changed all of that. When society rewards people for engagement in work, but there's decreasing reward in interpersonal spheres, then you're going to find that people are going to spend more time on work and they're going to have less patience, less energy, less time for creating good interpersonal relationships. Now, in the recent video, I talked about Schopenhauer, the philosopher, and his idea of the porcupine's dilemma in winter. Just to recap, Schopenhauer beautifully said that consider the dilemma of porcupines in winter who, when they're cold and they have to huddle together for warmth, will discover that they hurt each other because their quills, hurt each other and they have to move apart. When they're apart, they're cold. When they're together, they're hurting each other. So either they are cold and lonely or they're warm but uncomfortable because their quills are hurting each other. And he said very correctly that this is a dilemma for human beings in interpersonal relationships. That arguably, more so in today's world, it is easier for people emotionally to live alone. They don't have to cater to another person's needs. They can take care of themselves. They can do what they like. They don't, they're completely free. And technology takes care of a lot of things that in the past may have needed, just from a functional perspective, another person close to you. So what's happening is that the reward for spending time together is being decreased. The energies for spending time together and creating a good, healthy relationship where each person feels nurtured is being depleted. And as a consequence, people are approaching relationships from a very self centered, selfish perspective. Some would say that we are living in an era of narcissism in our relationships where everybody is approaching interpersonal relationships asking the question, perhaps not overtly, but at least subconsciously, asking the question, what is in it for me? And when you talk to people and ask them, what do you want in a relationship? It's just a laundry list of things that are good for you, isn't it? I mean, that's so obvious that for me to say it sounds strange, but I think the strangeness is that we have accepted this as the norm. And that just as you make a list of things that you desire in a car or any object, you make a list of attributes that you desire in a partner. We have reduced each other, and apps have only amplified that, reduced each other to commodities that you compare with another commodity and you decide what best serves your needs, failing to recognize that the other person, just like you, is a human being and that both people need to nurture each other. And when I say you, I mean everybody, because that's the world we live in, and a world where, obviously, because of all of these forces, people are increasingly lonely. Now, some people might be alone, but actually enjoy that state of being alone, and that is what we would call solitude. Every human being actually needs to feel and get in touch with this state of solitude to be able to enjoy one's own being and one's own engagement with life is a really important quality for mental health. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. So, the point here is that it is not about the number of people you're around or about whether you're alone or not. Loneliness is a question of how connected you feel compared to how connected you want to feel. So, a person who is amidst a lot of people but feels completely disconnected from them emotionally is going to be lonely. On the other hand, a person could be alone on a mountaintop meditating and feel completely happy with their solitude. There are people who are in intimate relationships, in marriages, in long term relationships, who have lost connection with their partner and who feel profoundly lonely. And there are people who don't have an intimate relationship but feel very connected with the world, with society in different relationships. So, the state of loneliness is a state of mind where a person feels disconnected from the tribe, from other human beings. And that is definitely toxic, and it must be toxic to us because we come from an evolutionary past of belonging to tribes. The human being has always been frail as an individual. And it was because of our collective strength, our ability to communicate and work together, that we have succeeded as a species. So even though technology changed and everything changed in terms of perhaps the way human beings live their life, to the extent that we do not need to live as a tribe in order to ward off attackers or marauders or predators in the forest, and therefore you can live by yourself. Hardwired into our brains, into our genes, is the need to connect to other human beings. And while technology has offered a facsimile, a semblance, a simulation, if you like, of connection, it is not real connection. So we have changed technologically in the sense that you can live alone, but our genes, for many of us, still crave connection. So one part of the human being who lives in today's world enjoys being alone and finds it harder and harder to be in touch and to really connect with another real human being in real life, which will entail all kinds of issues that and compromises and all kinds of issues that need emotional energy. Right? People are forsaking that, numbing themselves, and many people are suffering the pain of loneliness. The point of today's video is firstly to make you aware of loneliness if it is indeed an issue, to develop the capacity to enjoy solitude a bit more, as well as develop strategies to connect with other people so that you take care of this essential feature of mental health. And I just want to underline the fact that studies suggest that Indians and people in the East might be particularly vulnerable to the harmful effects of loneliness because our genes are perhaps even more hardwired for something called collectivism, which means a sense of belonging to the community as opposed to the individualism in the West. So we've all embraced the Western, if you like, the Western capitalistic, consumeristic lifestyle. And with that has come a lot of choice, mobility, autonomy, adventure, and all of that, the advantages of being part of this globalized world. But we in India need to be very careful about also taking on loneliness, isolation, and disconnection. Because it is not in our genes. I don't think it's in the genes of any human being, but it's certainly not in the genes of a collectivist society like ours. It's not hardwired into our brains. And therefore, what we need to do as we engage in this world is to really pay attention to the quality of interpersonal relationships and to make time, energy, and to develop the capacity to really, navigate the difficulties and challenges that are inevitable in any relationship rather than turning to gadgets, distractions, and other strategies to numb your loneliness. For those of you who feel that you're disconnected from others because you feel that you're unable to approach people or talk to them, this might be a matter of looking within, of asking yourself if there's work that needs to be done in terms of self esteem, in terms of interpersonal confidence and communication, and I would certainly encourage you to do that. I know that a lot of people in India move from one town to another, one city to another for work. And often this causes a cultural displacement, a feeling that you don't connect with people in this new place. And if you're feeling lonely because of that, I just want to remind you that everybody actually is very similar. And although culture might seem different, certain habits and lifestyle might seem different, I think it's useful to think of the common humanity, the fact that actually people underneath all of that are very, very similar. If you find yourself alone, another important quality, skill, is to develop the capacity to enjoy your alone time, to enjoy your solitude. Now, this really means that you're enjoying your own experience of life. So, for example, if you're reading a book or appreciating art or music or maybe just looking at a sunset and really getting in touch with the fact and the idea and the experience that you by yourself are in communion with the universe, with the world, and you're really enjoying that moment. Or perhaps it's developing a hobby or exercising, meditating. So, when you are able to enjoy your own state of existence, your own solitude, that is a very necessary quality so that you don't get overly dependent on interpersonal relationships. At the same time, remembering that connecting with others relationships is so important for mental health. And so, however busy you are, whatever your other priorities are, to also make time, space, and energy in your life to bring that connection in your life. With this balance between connection and the capacity for solitude, you will find a way to navigate this strange time we are living in, a time of increased loneliness, increased technology. You'll find a way to navigate that with a sense of balance and harmony in your life. If you're feeling lonely, the irony is you're not alone in that feeling. More and more people are feeling lonely these days. But these strategies, the awareness of the state of loneliness, cultivating the capacity for solitude, and developing the capacity for and having the energy and prioritizing interpersonal relationships to the right degree are all really, really important in today's world. I hope this video was helpful to you. Please let me know if it was, and let me know if there are any other topics in mental health, anything about the mind that you'd like me to discuss and explore. Thanks again for joining me, Dr. Shyam Bhat, on this episode of State of Mind. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you again soon.